Welcome to Agile to Agility podcast with Miljan, Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this another level.
We would get together. His favorite thing was sushi, right? So for sushi and drink hours and hours, we would talk about Scrum patterns and enterprise Scrum.
So Bob, how did you meet Mike Beedle? What was your first encounter with Mike?
Well, I'm trying to remember, because as I get older, my memory is not as good, but I know I met him in an elevator, which is kind of weird, right? Because you don't talk to people on an elevator, right? But I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong about it, but this sticks in my mind. It was at a Scrum gathering in Chicago, I think around 2008. And it was one of the early Scrum gatherings, and we were at this place called the Allerton Hotel. And people that were at that Scrum gathering will remember it because it was the Scrum gathering was on the upper floors, not like down in the main lot, main part of the hotel like they usually are. And there was like 2 or 3 elevators to get up to the upstairs. So, and we had open space, and the open spaces were on different floors. And it took forever when you got on the elevator. I mean, you would miss a session just because you're waiting for the elevator. And I got on the elevator, a bunch of people, we were crammed in there, and I was next to this guy, and he started talking to me. I'm like, wait, you can't talk to me on the elevator, right? But it turned out it was Mike Beedle. And I just found him interesting right away because he started talking about Scrum and his history with Scrum and how he wrote a book with Ken Schwaber about Scrum. But then he also started talking to me because we kind of hung around the rest of the conference together, started talking to me about Scrum patterns, enterprise Scrum, and just brought me in even more. And he's the one that really opened my mind to Scrum. Because I took my training from Ken Schwaber, years before that, but I didn't really get Scrum until Mike introduced me to these Scrum patterns. It kind of opened up my world and the possibilities of how we can use Scrum in different ways. But that's how I met Mike.
That is awesome. And yeah, I remember you, I think, introduced at least some of the patterns, and especially like when you were here on the East Coast and talking about the blob. I remember in classes, with in the classes that you taught here. In what other ways did Mike influence you?
Probably the biggest way Mike influenced me was through the Scrum patterns, and I do a lot of work in the Chicagoland area. I lived in Illinois for a while. I've kind of lived all over, but I still do work in Chicagoland. And so Mike lived in Chicago, right? Kind of, I can't remember where, but in the outskirts of Chicago. So we would get together often. So we would have these long discussions. We would get together. His favorite thing was sushi, right? So for sushi and drink hours and hours, we would talk about Scrum patterns and enterprise Scrum. He got me more interested in enterprise Scrum. And eventually I became a certified trainer in enterprise Scrum. But we just kind of had this relationship over the years, just getting together and talking about Scrum and eating sushi.
And apparently drinking a lot too, right?
Well, we won't talk about that too much, but yeah, there was some of that.
Everybody that I talked to, it's like, with Mike, it's eating and drinking, after the trainings. You've done some co-trainings with him as well. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So I think he approached me. So I met him in 2008, and he approached me around 2011 because I was doing some classes, close to where he lived. And even though he co-wrote the book with Ken Schwaber, the first book on Scrum, and he had been implementing Scrum for years, he decided he wanted to become a certified Scrum trainer. And so during that time, the Scrum Alliance had a requirement that if you wanted to become a certified Scrum trainer, you had to co-train with people, so, which was kind of weird to me. But so he came and co-trained a lot with me, the local classes around by where he lived. He would come in, do some of the topics, talk about enterprise Scrum. And then we would go out for sushi and drinks after the class. But we did a lot of that together, and eventually he became a certified Scrum trainer.
So Scrum Alliance didn't make any exceptions, even for Mike.
Yeah, well, they made
He had
at
to
that
go.
time they did make a couple of exceptions for some people, but not for Mike for some reason. So he had to go through the whole thing, and so we did a lot of co-training together. So we got to know each other even better.
Nice. When it comes to enterprise Scrum, from my perspective, many people I talked to, they saw Mike and the way that he was thinking and looking ahead, as far as what's coming, as far as scaling business agility. What are your thoughts on business agility in general, and like what his foresight or what he was doing with enterprise Scrum at that time, and it's probably been on his mind way before he started popularizing or trying to put it into a framework type of thing.
Well, if you had the chance to talk to Mike, he'd been coming up with enterprise Scrum since the Adam and Eve, right? But I mean, from the first time I met him, even though Ken Schwaber came out with a book, Enterprise and Scrum, years and years ago, he's the first one that really was talking about enterprise Scrum. Others were as well, but in a way that really made sense to me, that we could take these concepts and this mindset, and we can spread it throughout the whole organization, right? And achieve a business agility and get better at understanding our market and our customers and the people in our organization, right? He was the first one that really kind of brought me into that world, and again, changed my life. He changed my life in so many different ways.
But I think we live in a world where a lot of frameworks are prescriptive, and they're based on patterns, but they're a lot more prescriptive. And I think kind of where we headed to is like what enterprise Scrum is about, which is contextualizing those patterns. And I was never part of that group that you guys were, as far as like the trainers and but to me it seems like the future and what really works is contextualizing these patterns in your context. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Do you see it that way? I mean, like, how do you see enterprise Scrum living on after Mike? In what ways?
Yeah, and fortunately, I think for those of us that were really involved, we've embraced the concepts. We're using them in our own way, because that's really what patterns are. I mean, a pattern really is a solution to a problem in a specific context, and it's not meant to be prescriptive. So you just really have to understand what is the essence of that pattern. How might you use it? What benefit might you get from it? And you adapt it to what works for you, right? And you can create sequences of these patterns. And so I think Mike just had a really good understanding of how these fit together, and they're not meant to be prescriptive. I mean, they're just meant to kind of show you some light, right? Show you a way, right? And then you make them your own.
Exactly. And you evolve them, I'm assuming too, as you go, right?
Yeah.
You had a dinner just before Mike's murder. What did you guys discuss?
Well, we discussed a lot of things, but typically our discussions were about enterprise Scrum, business agility, Scrum patterns. If I remember correctly, we went to one of his favorite places that we went to a lot, called the Real Club. It was in Oak Brook, Illinois. Sushi, right? Drinks. And I can't remember when we had it, but it was probably a couple months before, unfortunately, his life was taken from him. But I'll always remember that dinner, and I think about him often, even today.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just I know I was shocked. My first encounter to him was or with Mike was in Dublin. I think it was 2016, maybe, whenever that conference, global gathering was. And it was just like interesting how humble he was. What other, I guess, experiences have you had, or things about Mike maybe that you would like to share, if there's anything?
Yeah, most of our get-togethers, and they were frequent for quite a while, were mostly about enterprise Scrum and Scrum patterns, and the world of work. You know, how can we make things better for people, you know, in their lives when they go to work. We did have some experiences at Scrum gatherings and things like that. One that really stands in mind was a Scrum gathering in Amsterdam. I really can't go into all that we did there, but I think that was the one time we didn't really talk about Scrum patterns or enterprise Scrum. We just enjoyed the atmosphere.